So you're listening to The Exchange by Evolution, a melting pot of ideas and inspiration shared by some of the most successful technical leaders in the APAC region. I am Danielle, Senior Consultant in Evolution Recruitment Solutions, and I help connect businesses with tech talent. And today, I am your host. Welcome to today's episode of the podcast where we're discussing the topic of how to level up as a product manager. Today, we have a stellar lineup of questions that will unveil the secrets of becoming a better product manager. I'm absolutely thrilled to have two seasoned product leaders with me today. Isaac Tay from Shopback and Protik Roychowdhury from Intellect, both VP of Products. So to start with, it would be great to get each of you to briefly introduce yourself. Maybe you can start with Protik.
Okay. Hey, thanks for having me here. Super excited to talk to you, Danielle and Isaac. We've had quite a few conversations before this, and I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion. As you said, currently I lead product design and analytics at Intellect. Intellect is a mental health startup here in Southeast Asia. Our aim is to become, let's say, globally the best mental health ecosystem provider there can be. Previous to Intellect, I worked at Grab for a few years on their consumer experience team. And before Grab, I did a few startups of my own, worked at a bunch of different startups, mostly across B2C, B2B, and logistics. So yeah, you could say I've seen small companies, big companies, and everything in between.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that, Protik. And Isaac?
Hi everyone, my name is Isaac. I am the VP of Product at Shopback. Shopback is an online and offline rewards platform that help our users find the best deals and earn cashback when they shop from the merchants that we work with. We are primarily a cost per sale model, and we help our merchants drive customers, orders, and average order value. We are now in 11 markets.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for the introduction and great to have you guys on this episode. So to kick things off, I think we need to understand, of course, what the expectations of a product manager is. I know both of you guys have been in big companies as well as small companies. So the first question is, what to expect as a product manager, big company and smaller company.
That's a loaded question, right? The thing with product management, I like to say is, if you go on LinkedIn, you'll see a lot of people talk about what a good PM is, how to set up for a PM role. There's so many podcasts, books, a lot of things about. We're speaking about it, right?
Yeah.
Realistically, I feel that the role of a PM is sort of very different in every company you go to, and the company's size, culture, and the people within tend to define what a PM there does and doesn't do. Just wanted to give that caveat before we discuss. I don't know, Isaac, what you feel about it, but I think it's important to understand that before we speak about what is core to a PM. Because something that sets you up for success at one company might not set you up for success at another.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think when I think about product management, I think of it a little bit like cooking, right? So at the end result, whether it's a good dish, right? Whether it's a home cooked meal by your mom or a Michelin star restaurant. Like when you eat it, this is a good meal and everything else. But what does it take to be a good chef, right? It depends on the ingredients. It depends on the context. At the end of the day, the product is the same. It's a good meal. But what does it take to be a good chef in different environments, different scenarios? Like Protik said, it really depends on the company when it comes to product management.
Right. Yeah. But it's important for the food to be good. Right?
Oh yeah. But it's important for the product to be good as well. You also know, right? Like whether it's a B2B, B2C, this is a good product. But what it takes to get that is different, right?
Correct. Actually, within that, I think I was actually putting some thought into this yesterday, and I feel the question was around big versus small, right?
Yeah.
As someone who's been through different sizes of companies and made my fair share of mistakes, it's for anyone starting off in a PM role, the first thing you need to know is it's okay to make mistakes, as long as you learn from it. Now, within that, the question is, there's this level of self-realization that everyone needs to have, which is are you more comfortable as an owner or are you more comfortable as a renter? Now, this is a small distinction, and there's nothing wrong with either, by the way. This is a small distinction that I think separates people who thrive at a big company to people who thrive at a smaller company. In a bigger company, you have a lot of processes, teams, a lot of structure around you that allows you to learn slowly while sharpening some of the skills that you need to thrive within that company. In a smaller company, you might not have the processes, you might not have the teams, you might have a lot more things that you're doing that are not defined at all. And that's where the mentality becomes very important. It's just something that you are either comfortable with or you're not comfortable with.
So that being said, right, is it as someone going new into product management, is there like a preferred or recommended? Should you start at an MNC and then or start at a big company and then go into a startup? Or
Well, I think to your point, it really depends on your personality, right? It also depends on your, character, personality, and it also depends on your background, right? If we assume that you're going in, at working age, right? Let's assume 18. You have 18 years before that of past experiences that have shaped you in a certain way, and so you have a preference for a certain way of doing things, and you might also thrive in a certain kind of environment. So, I don't think there is the best way to start your product management career is to go to MNC or big company or small company. It is in which environment do you thrive in?
Correct.
And is that the environment that you want to thrive in? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. I think that's the thing, right? Knowing who you are and what you're comfortable with. But again, like I said, you've got to fail sometimes to figure out whether you're in the right place or not. So to your question of where should we start,
what to expect?
or what to expect, I would suggest if we know what we are comfortable with, if we are okay with a certain level of ambiguity, a certain level of uncertainty, right? Then a startup is a great place to learn, because where else would you at an early age have the ability to take up big things and potentially make big mistakes or have even bigger rewards and even bigger returns, right? As a fresh grad, if you're getting into the PM role, you go to a bigger company, you will probably be given a really small feature which is probably well defined, and what you have to do is basically take that definition, write a few user stories, figure out how to work with design, figure out how to work with tech, figure out how to run a sprint, and then just do a release, and then figure out how to look at the metrics, right? But when you go into a startup, you probably will be given a lot more than that to chew off. So of course you don't have the structure where maybe you don't have a designer, or maybe your designer is also just out of college and still is figuring their stuff out, right?
Yeah.
You don't have fixed structures or support systems. And it's just a high risk, high reward thing, I think. Sometimes you'll find people who really thrive in that, and they like taking up a challenge, they like taking up that opportunity. Of course, as our job is to ensure that they have the freedom to fail, right? But as long as you have that core ownership within you, I think startups offer a lot more accelerated learning and growth. Maybe it's about what you want out of life.
Talking about the structures part, one of the things. So I've never worked in a big company or MNC. What I've noticed though is that you're right. At least from the folks that come from those and that I've interacted with, they have learned the right way to do things. And I'm going to put it in quotes because I think sometimes the right way to do things is also contextual. And I think sometimes when we learn the right way to do things, we don't fully understand why that is the right way, right? So why do you do backlog grooming, or why do you have retros, and we don't understand why those things were put in place. So it becomes a routine, it becomes something that you do just because you have to do it, and someone says that you have to do it. I think what happens is when you first, start as a startup, and then you or a smaller company, you do a lot of things, and then you start realizing, hey, I have certain problems that I need to solve. Maybe I need to improve communication, or I need to improve coordination. Then maybe you go out and start learning how have other people solved those problems.
Yeah.
And then you realize that in your context, maybe it's too heavy to run the full sprint process, right? Because maybe it's just the right amount of process. So when we learn things, however we learn, I do think it's important that you don't just copy and paste from one organization to another, especially the transitioning between a big and small company and anything else, because you got to understand why something was put in place and whether it's still relevant for your situation. One of the things I noticed is that when you learn the right way to do things, but you don't think about why that is the right way, then it becomes things that you just do that actually slows you down, right? And so, talking about like, even if you were to enter a bigger organization first and you learn stuff, once you make the transition to a different bigger organization, you gotta adapt what you have learned.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I think one of the things that's really, when I look back on my career, one of the things that I was really blessed to have was managers who supported me in ensuring, like, while I figure out what these structures are and whether it's needed or how to navigate around them, that I always keep my eye on the prize, which is essentially, we're getting into a deeper discussion here, I think, but basically ensuring that you're executing well and executing on the right things, right? And not be afraid to make a couple of mistakes along the way.
Right.
Okay. But yeah, I think you're right on the structure. Actually, even in a big company, I've seen sometimes processes change every 6 or 9 months anyway, because even the company is evolving, new people come in, the company is learning. So I think, everything's in an evolving state. You're right. It's more about understanding what a structure is supposed to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think you guys also covered kind of a little bit of the second question, right? Which is how to set yourself up for success in a new environment. Is it just the soft skills of being adjustable, adaptable, or being open-minded?
This is a conversation I've actually very recently had with someone. It could get a little philosophical, but essentially the role of a PM is such that you can never on your own get a lot of things done. You need a designer, you need your analyst, you need your tech teams, you need your PMM, you need your business owner, right? Even if it's not within those exact role definitions, you still need someone doing all of this, right? So as the PM, you're always working with teams of individuals, right? And the only thing you can't control, or rather the only thing you can control, is what you bring to the table. So if you imagine life as a spectrum, right? You're a PM. You might have the insane luck of being in a team where everyone else is super independent, super organized, and bringing 100% to the table. In a team like that, sometimes the PM is redundant, right? The PM has time to think about the bigger stuff, more strategic, less tactical, right? Well, not redundant, but you know what I mean. And sometimes you are unlucky enough to be put in a team where no one has the independence, the ownership, or is bringing anything to the table.
It almost sounds like what you're saying is that as a product manager, don't complain when the people you work with are hard to work with, because the only reason why you have a job is because of the people you have to work with. they were easy to work with, they were super invalid.
Correct.
Why do I need you, right? It's almost like
Correct.
you're saying that.
I mean, you could put it that way, right? But the point being that you'll never be at the ends of the spectrum. You'll just be somewhere along the
Yes.
spectrum, right? So as a PM, the most successful PMs at least in a smaller company know how to operate at each point in that spectrum. You get put into a team where you feel you've got to take up a little more work on one of the other areas, you just bring people along. If you get on a team where you see that the team is doing really well, you take a step back. But either way, you know what needs to be done at each end of the spectrum. What sometimes I find from people who are transitioning from a bigger company to a smaller company is, like you said, right? They've had the process. If they don't understand why the process exists, then these PMs can only function well in that end of the spectrum, where they've worked with a certain level of a designer,
Right.
or worked with a certain level of a tech team,
Yeah.
or worked with a certain level of an architect,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And the moment that level changes, they have that adjustment issue.
Right.
So I think, to set yourself up for success as a PM in a small company, I wouldn't speak to a larger company. In a small company, you need to be comfortable at every point in that spectrum, from where you are 100% hands-on to on everything, from like the smallest design decisions to the largest strategic decisions, to the other end of the spectrum where your team is so great that you don't need to worry about how the design is being executed, how the tech is being done, and you can just talk to users all day.
It's so interesting that the title, the functional title is product manager, but what you're really saying is that they're actually very much a people manager. And
Yeah.
and if you think about being a people manager, you got to decide when's the right time to direct or delegate or coach or support, right? And that's what you're alluding to. Interesting enough, I think this gets manifested in one way when you write Jira tickets, right? Because there's this argument about what is the right way to write Jira tickets, right? And then there must be a structure to write it, right? But for some folks that you work with, being too detailed and too precise, and like going down to the granularity of what the solution should be, the person will be like, why are you so prescriptive, right? Can't you just give me the prompt?
Correct.
I know how to
Yeah,
solve it.
yeah.
But there's some folks will be like, I think you're not clear enough, can you? And then by the time you write out the whole Jira ticket, you realize, you know what? Actually, maybe I should have just designed this or
Right.
coded out. So even that, alludes to your point, right? Like, it really depends who you're working with.
Yeah, I think, as a PM, the one thing we need to stop doing is complain about anything. Just because I think, and this is just me, right? I think we are lucky to be in a job where we can be creative and add value.
Right.
Like, not many jobs like that, right? Where you say, there's a user problem somewhere. Now I can think of 20 ways of solving the user problem, but of course there's probably 19 of them are not the right way around it, right? But what other job allows you to have the creativity and also impact the lives? Just generally, as long as you get to build cool stuff and take it to market, I think a good PM should just be like really happy all across the spectrum, whether they're doing like really minute work as well, or whether they're only doing big strategic user level work.
So flip the question around. You ask what it takes to succeed when you move into a new company, or whether move from small to big, big to small, big to big, small to small. And I think we were trying to share what you should do. Maybe we flip it around, since you say don't complain. What should you not do when you... Right, so firstly, don't complain. Don't complain.
Understand and be adaptable.
So that's something you should do. What should you not do?
Be stuck in your ways, right? Every user is different. Again, I think I go back to another thing someone had told me once. Sometimes as PMs we get too over reliant on data, right? But we've got to realize that every data point is an actual person who has a problem.
Right.
So you can't just say that that's an outlier and I'm solving for 80%.
Right.
There's 20% people out there in the real world trying to get something done,
Right.
right? So and that's different for every company, every feature, every process, every team, right? So I think adaptability super important, understanding super important. Uh, just the nature of our jobs is such that we are solving problems, and you can't solve problems if you're like really strict, right? At least I feel it's difficult to solve problems if you are like set in your ways.
I feel like the example that you just gave, it's a lot more relevant, or it makes a lot more sense because of the company that you're from, right? Like to take it to the extreme, basically, if we were like, oh, this is an outlier, basically you might be saying, and I'm not saying that that's what your company is saying, it's like that 1% of people with issues that we can't seem to handle, they don't matter, right? And I think because of your company,
Sure.
that there has a certain lens. But I wonder whether in other companies where it's not about the mental well-being of the individual, whether the calculus is a little bit more cold.
That's fair. I mean, one thing that comes to mind is, let's say you're a transportation app, right? Unnamed.
You haven't been there.
No, but if you're Grab, for example, right?
You can't say Grab.
If your app can load in under a second for 99% of cases, right? There's still that 1% of cases where there's a person on the road trying to book a cab, but they can't because your app is not loading. And this might be at night. They might be in an area of a city that's not good to be at night, right? So, I mean, sure, there can be places where maybe that outlier is not that critical, but generally I feel just understanding the fact that every data point is a user in need or a user who has a problem allows you to build that empathy, build that adaptability, and build that understanding. And that then goes into your teams, it goes into your work, it goes into your decisions, and it just flows.
Right. It's like saying don't test your app with the latest iPhone in 4G connection and say like I don't see a problem with my app. Right?
It's actually very true because we do know that a lot of Southeast Asia or Asian countries are heavy on lower Android phones. Right. So one of the things I love to ask people is, in your company, how many designers have iPhones,
Right.
and how many have Android phones? Because
That's a really great point, and I mean, maybe we're going back about what it takes to succeed in product management and everything else. I think diversity of experiences is very important, and I think one of the things where maybe fortunately or unfortunately, Singapore has become like at least a hub for the region, and so the designers are here, the product managers are here, the engineers are here, but if we really want to be a meaningful company or a significant company, you gotta expand out of Singapore. And if the team that you have built does not have the diversity of experience, even if something as simple of how many is using the latest iPhone or Android, then how do you really build a product that can meaningfully solve for folks? Because you can't even deliver the product to them, right? If you're not thinking about what your end users are using. Yeah. So diversity of experience is very important. And at the individual level, I think what will set you up for being a good product manager is to have diversity of experience. So it's not just within the team, but within the individual, right? Don't just be a designer. Don't just be an engineer. Don't just only go to tier 1 cities and have holidays, right? So have that diversity of experience.
with your company, I'm very curious to know because it's a lot more scale at B2C. Right. Do you have like any interesting stories from a user research session or a user that you spoke to or saw and you find a problem that you didn't think of?
I won't talk about my current company. I'll talk about the other company that I must say is way smaller than my current company. Just to clarify another.
I had made that mistake just now.
So. And I think it's okay to share because the company is not an ongoing concern. We we started out with the premise that we wanted to try to figure out how to create economic opportunities for blue collar workers, right? So the central thesis at that time is that folks like yourself and myself, we have LinkedIn to find the best economic opportunities. But how would blue collar workers, and in Singapore that would mean your gig workers, the folks that work, have better economic opportunities. And so it's one of the reasons why the name is Honors BA, and obviously it turned out to be maybe slightly ironic, but there wasn't mention of grocery or anything, right? It's about hardworking people, doing gig work, and it started with grocery delivery. Now, it's on Wikipedia. There was some controversy about salaries, and the idea basically is that how do we make sure that we keep time properly for the bees who are working, and we make sure that they get paid on time, right? So even if the amount was like $15 or $10, if that was their salary, they should be paid the correct salary. That was something that I think as a team early on, it wasn't consistently believed that this was non-negotiable, right? I think the bad press became an impetus to fix it, but I really wonder whether earlier on, if we had a more diversified group of individuals building this, right? Because your tech workers, all highly paid, right? Or working in the office, good salaries. So then, in the way, what we tried to do was to create the empathy. It was like, okay, don't talk about the quantum, but imagine if we didn't pay your salary on time. You will flip out, right? What more the gig workers, where maybe that amount matters a lot more, right? Even though it seems smaller. So we had to try to figure out how to create that level of empathy and educate our guys that this was something that was important. Eventually, we sorted it out. I would like to think that it wasn't something that was sorted out just because of the bad press that we got, and it was a commercial decision. I like to think that it was because, as a team at that time, we truly believed that if the genesis of our company was to create better economic opportunities for gig workers, then the most basic thing is to pay salary accurately on time, right? It's like a P0, right? It's like I don't even need to explain it to you. So I think eventually we sorted it out. But I would have liked to not even had to sort it out, right? And I think if we had maybe a bit more folks with diverse experience from the start, this would have been something that would be so glaringly obvious that you gotta sort this out. I think one of the product managers that I'm currently working with, I worked with her in the last company as well. And the reason why I think we've become very close, and we both, at least I have a lot of trust in her, is because what happened was, sorry, I'm rambling a bit, but what happened was one of our designers actually knew one of the gig workers, and privately as friends, and so she messaged him and said like, hey, do you know there's been some discrepancies with some of my colleagues? And then he escalated it to me, and together this PM and myself, but more her, she spent the whole night, didn't go home or anything else, just to trace down to the cent what everyone should got, and then we proactively suffered, and then so that's so what makes a good product manager, right? Really understanding that there are real people behind that, and not resting until you solve that problem, right? And so that's why she has my trust to this day about anything, because she didn't sleep. She was down to the cent, and she was very accurate. And then from then on, I think we sorted it out. So yeah. I don't know what the question was. Now I've totally forgotten the question.
That makes sense, because what makes a good product manager, right?
So basically we've covered all the questions in our discussion, so I don't need to ask anything. The question after that was more of what differentiates a good PM from a great PM, which is what you're saying, right? Diversity of experience, and also adaptability, and then being able to lead people.
I think we've spoken a lot about what a smaller company does, so I just want to shout out Grab as well, because Grab is quite big. One thing that Grab made me do the week I joined, like the month I joined Grab, was they flew me to Indonesia and I delivered food for a day with a driver.
Really?
Right? So you start the day at their house, they get ready, they take their bag, and then you sit with them and go deliver food. And I think that again, it's something that a big company can allow you to do, because in a smaller company there's always so much, we're always short on people, right, and short on time, and there's so much things that we've got to prioritize on work, where sometimes in a bigger company you do get these opportunities to continue reinforcing that, yeah, this is important.
Yeah.
Like what you're building is an actual person
Yeah.
who's using this, so you understand these problems, you understand, oh wait, a 3-minute wait doesn't seem a lot when you're ordering food.
Yeah.
But if I am at the restaurant
Yeah.
and there's 50 other people trying to pick up food,
Yeah.
a 3-minute wait before I get the order
Yeah.
is a lifetime for me.
Yeah.
That's the difference between lunch break and no lunch break, right? So it's yeah, I think there's something to call out there as well, because in a bigger company you do get the time, the resources, and the structure to do structure to spend like a day, weeks with users just understanding them, which is something you might not get at a smaller company.
Yeah, I wonder whether this is something that, whether you're big or small, it shouldn't be an excuse whether you can do it or not.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
I do think that, at all levels, the experience that you had, I think is a lot meaningful. I think that's one of the reasons why I suspect, and this is just a suspicion, people prefer to be B2C product managers, and they like to be product managers that work on what the consumer sees, because they say, I'm a consumer as well, and so easy to understand, right? I don't have to do this part, because it is actually a different, it can be uncomfortable,
Correct.
and it's a different type of muscle. But I think, again, it goes back to an earlier point, which is it's a diversity of experience,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
How do you build tools for drivers, or in this case, delivery folks, if you haven't experienced it yourself? You can't sit and look at a dashboard and go, okay, this, right, 3 minutes, let's bring down to 2 minutes.
Yeah.
2 minutes, like you said, in the office, very different from...
2 minutes outside on the street.
Yeah. Right, so...
Makes me think about how I felt so upset when they changed the 5-minute wait time to 3 minutes. And I was like getting charged for 3 minutes. And now it makes sense, right? Because every ride you're late for 5 minutes, they waste a lot of time. Yeah.
But I think, yeah, as a PM, have you ever seen a high performing PM who wasn't driven by a need to solve a problem? A high performing PM who wasn't...
What will such a high performing PM be driven by then?
It's a good question, because I was just trying to figure out, it could be around, okay, when I say the need to solve a problem, I mean the need to solve a big enough user/business problem, instead of, you could have people motivated by other stuff,
Right.
instead of, just having something that you build go out there and have a huge
Okay.
impact.
Okay, I've seen product managers climb up their career ladder without being obsessed with solving a problem, right?
Fair.
So I've seen that. But if you're saying, have I ever seen a high performing product manager, who has never been obsessed with that? The answer is no. But your question is a little bit of a loaded question, because
that's true.
because being obsessed is the high performing part, right? Because eventually when you
That
solve
is
it,
true.
right? So it feels a bit loaded.
That is true. That is true. Maybe the question is, what is it? What's the common trait? Is it like insane curiosity?
I think
Or
curiosity is one.
Is it the need to solve a problem? Right. Because there's a common thread, like first principles, right? Given, if you write a Gherkin statement, given you're a PM, when you have immense curiosity, then you'll be solving the right problems. Just wondering if you've seen in your career a common thread.
Well, I'll say this: they don't always choose the same problems.
Sure.
I think different people get interested in
Yeah.
different types of problems. But you're right. I don't think I've ever seen a high-performing PM, once they have latched onto a problem, not be driven and consumed by the need to solve it. Having said that, being consumed and driven by a need to solve a problem does not make you a high-performing PM.
That's true. Fair.
Because you may not have the skills or
Yeah.
whatever to solve it. But I think I've never seen a high-performing PM not be consumed by one thing.
Yeah.
Then that's where, what it takes to be a good product manager or a great product manager really comes down to choosing the right problem. And I think that's where product management leadership comes in, which is that you help your team members who, by virtue of them having the potential to be high performing PM, is you got to help them choose the right problems. Because what's going to happen is that they're going to, if they choose the wrong problem, they're going to be so consumed by it, they'll solve it.
Yeah.
And within the problem space, yes, they're high performing PM, but it's not impactful. Right? And so maybe the company doesn't benefit from it, the users don't benefit from it, their career doesn't benefit from it. So product leadership then is to help folks choose the right problem, and then everything else, their own personality, their own character, just pushes things forward. Yeah.
Okay, and just now you mentioned skills, right? And I think we spoke a lot about soft skills, or like the mindset and the way you are as a PM. But what about hard skills? Because I think I work as a recruiter, right? There's a lot of people that I see, they want to be a product manager. Only recently we had a product manager course come up recently, right? Before that, no one studied product management. I don't know a single person that went to school to study product management. So everyone asked me, Dan, I want to move into a PM. I'm currently doing real estate. What do I need to pick up in terms of skill set to be a good PM, or to start as a PM, or even be considered to be a PM? And I am not the person to tell you that. I can tell you what everyone else has, but because I'm not a PM, I will never know what you actually need, right? So let's take that scenario where someone's a real estate agent and she's like, Dan, I'm really interested in product management. I read all about it, I heard podcasts. How do I make that transition, and what do I need to pick up? What advice do you guys have on that?
You want to have a gander at it first?
I think, again, right, the functional skills that you need, I think one which is non-negotiable for all product managers is project management. You got to be strong at project management. You got to be able to think about what the resources you need to complete the project, what are the dependencies, how you communicate with the different stakeholders, which is not exactly always a soft skill. There are some hard skills there, so right. So being able to do project management is fundamental, and I think it's one of the reasons why when you start out your career, whether in a big or small, being able to deliver the right solution at the right time is super key, right? And I think that's one of the first things you learn. After that, the different types of functional skills really depends in the space that you're playing in and your inclination to play in that space. And I think there's a few. I put in a few buckets. One is operations, marketing, BD, sales, design, data analyst, and engineering, or being more technical. So it really depends on the space that you're going to play in. Then you got to be strong in that functional skill set.
Yeah, 100% agreed. Again, I go back to that spectrum analogy, right? Project management is just getting 20 people aligned on the same deliverable to get the same deliverable done within the right amount of time, right? So yeah, project management is super important. At least having a handle on what's happening at any point in time, right? The functional part of the different types of PMs that you spoke about is super important, like a growth PM or like a platform PM that you said, engineering, right?
Data.
Or a data. Those are things I think I would ask your real estate friend to think about later, because you've got to cut your teeth in some stuff before you realize what works for you. Now, okay, if I'm looking for a data PM or a platform PM, I'd probably be looking for some sort of engineering background or some sort of core skills in maybe a Python or just basic past work on data. But if not, I don't think there's any hard or soft skills. Actually, again, one of my previous managers, shout out to Fabian, who's in Lineman right now. He used to say that the it's again variety, right? You need all types to make up a team, and a good team of high functional people just come from different backgrounds. There's no reason to say someone who's worked in real estate throughout their life will not be bringing a different perspective to a solution. And as long as your friend in real estate knows how to spot a solution and how to get it done, right? Everything else is learnable, teachable. So if you have the attitude and you want to become better, I think the product management is the one role, except for engineering slash data API. Actually, you could even grow into that, or a growth PM. But yeah, generally, a designer or a consumer facing PM or a normal B2B logistics PMs. You could come from any background.
Yeah, I think what I see there is a kind of a problem now is that, like we did talk about this before on our last conversation, where you said like smaller companies don't have the resources to handhold and train you, right? Whereas you have MNCs who bring in interns, right? Which is like such a limited amount of people, and then slowly train them to be there. So is the right direction for someone like that, or someone a whole different vocation to just go into an MNC and start as an intern? Or is it someone to go into being a BA and be like, okay, I hope maybe I can have some transferable skills into a PM? Because I know there's like product management internships are very limited, right? And I do advise people to go into that, but really, like realistically, there's not enough for everyone, right? And like they always struggle to find a way in, right? And that's the issue here. I mean, you can have the best attitude, like your CV, best attitude. No one's gonna be like, okay, this guy's gonna be a PM, right? So that's one of the more advice that I can't give myself, because I don't ever get people from a whole different, junior people to move into a PM role, right? And I think that's what people are struggling to understand. A lot of questions that I get from more junior guys are like, look, how will I get a job as a product manager without have a product manager experience? Do I start off as a data analytics intern, which is a lot more, there's a lot more options there? Or do I start off as a software engineer, learn a bit of computer engineering, and then hopefully with my interview skills, I might get a PM role. Did the question make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I mean, the way I think about it, right, is that, and going back to your first point, and even the question you asked, have I ever seen a high-performing PM that's not obsessed about a problem? I think if there's a JD, that's great, but I do think that a lot of the JDs tend to be very cookie cutter and very generic, right? I do think that if you can get a sense of what the problem space is and the problem that the company needs to solve, insofar as in regards to having a product manager solve it, then you ask yourself whether you have the skill sets to solve it, right? And so I think maybe the question should be flipped around. Instead of saying, what does it take to succeed in a product manager, or how do I become a product manager from where I am? The question you want to then go is seek out problems and companies that have problems that you think you can help solve, right, as a product manager. And then, I think that's maybe one of the ways to think about this. And so, for example, maybe in a company like my previous company, where the problem space that we were in is how do we deliver groceries 100% on time, 100%, which means everything that the user they get it and we deliver it on time. If you are able to then understand what it takes to solve that problem from the operational side, right? Even though you don't have an operational background, you can break down the process of doing that, and you can see where the gaps is in terms of fulfilling that service, and then understanding how to build the tools and you know articulate what the tools would be and everything else. Then it doesn't matter your background. So maybe your functional skill would be, are you able to abstract problems? Are you able to break down problems into its pieces? Are you able to see where the issues are? Is that a functional skill?
But as a hiring manager, if I came to you and be, look, Isaac, you have a problem, right? Shopback has this problem, like, and I think I can solve it. And you look at my CV and it's like real estate agent, right? And you're like, hey Isaac, I can solve this problem. Will you even give me an interview?
I think that's one of the reasons why people do portfolios or do
build stuff on the side.
Okay.
So here's the thing. I totally agree with what you're saying, that it might be difficult for someone who is not even in an industry that's adjacent to tech to want to come into the product manager role. Two questions. One is, again, goes back to my first point on self-realization. Why do you want to be a product manager? Is it because you want to solve problems or because it sounds cool? Right? Either way, if you do want to be a product manager, you'll never go wrong with starting to build stuff. And yes, internships might be not always available at the biggest companies or the companies that you know of, but there's always something to be built. If you, in your real estate example, maybe there's a scheduler she wants to build for herself, or a booking form that her people, like whoever she's showing houses to, can book her time or book a slot to do an open house. There's always some problem that needs to be solved, and I don't think building anything.
But I don't even know how to build it, right? So why do you pick up an engineering?
The harsh answer is yes.
Yeah.
You've got to learn the skills to build, because product management is not just about going to a company and then building things. Sometimes you also need to learn to buy things, and sometimes you need to learn to stitch the things that you bought together or the things that you bought and built together. And today, right, with I think there was a Y Combinator post recently that showed some guy, I think, managed to clone Angry Birds using ChatGPT, helping. And obviously, the individual had to make some edits to the code, but was able to do it fairly quick. And then there's also no-code tools out there where actually it's so interesting that you use the real estate example. I recently have a friend was sharing with me how she's in operations role, and she was helping one of her clients build a content management system, and it was using a no-code tool, and it's like she has no engineering background, but she was doing product management and from my perspective, because there was a problem needed to be solved. She built a product using no-code tools that helped solve the problem, and no engineers was involved, no designers, it was just herself. And so it may seem a little bit harsh, but you got to figure out how to build things, especially if you're trying to break into the industry, because that's the best way to show folks that you can be a product manager.
That's true, right? Because think about it, why does tech or product exist anyway? So let's say you have a shop, right? And you're only selling one thing to 10 people. You don't need any product, you can just do it with a pen and a paper, right? You order the 10 things, sell, have a profit and loss on your page, right? Maybe when you have a lot more things to sell and a lot more people, you can do it on an Excel sheet, right? If you have 2 shops, sure, maybe you have Google Sheets because you use the same Google Sheet. The only time you need a product and a tech team is when you want to scale to a level where the same resource can do 100x things, right? So to that point, I think product management is not just building features. It's about solving a problem. Is there a problem that needs to be solved? How can you solve it? You could maybe solve it, like you said, with no code at all, just like stitching some stuff together, right? Or you could just solve it by throwing people at it. But as long as you know how to solve a problem, then it's just a matter of taking that problem and adding more scale to it. Like, can I solve this problem for 100 more people at the same cost? Okay, maybe I need to build something here.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that's actually one of the better answers that I've heard. I think a lot of people do struggle and they don't know how to get it. But yeah, it makes sense to find a problem, then try it on your own, right? To get something done and put it in your CV, right? At least better than say I tried or I watched a podcast on product or I watched this podcast. That's why I'm here. Yeah. So that's pretty good advice. I mean, do you have anything to add on that or?
I mean, at the risk of rambling, the reason I bring this up is because there's this common interview question, right? Which is, don't really like it too much, but it has its merits. Which is, how would you design an alarm clock for blind people? So there you can have a person who's always prepared from a book versus a person who's actually built stuff, and there'll be a very key thing that'll be different between the two, because a person who's built stuff would also talk about the color of paint you use, because different paints cost different, right? Would probably talk about the material you use. Are you doing like plastic or are you doing like a metal mold? Because again, building things has a lot of nuances, right? And unless you have built stuff in your life, whenever you come to a problem like this, right, you'd always go like, sure, I have a voice enabled alarm clock, and you go to the cool features, but the actual build comes in, okay, wait, is it like battery powered or is it like plug-in, right? Who does the setup? Is the setup happening at the store or is the setup happening at home, right? Am I getting stuff painted in China? If so, does the color really matter, or can I just use the cheapest color? That is not poisonous, hopefully. But there's always I think that's the difference between a good and a great PM. Where a great PM's actually built stuff before, so they go into the actual problems, the real world problems, and don't get always distracted by the shimmer.
Okay. Yeah, and to conclude, what's your conclusion of this conversation, or what separates a good from a normal PM? It's been a long debate about this.
It's a whole long question.
Please step.
I mean, the standard answers, right? Like, you gotta be obsessed with the details. You gotta have to have empathy towards your users. But like, I think there's no substitute for being someone who creates things. And I think the best product managers are the kinds that create things or build things. It's not always the same thing. Like, I think there is a product manager, someone that I know that I consider a great product manager, but they don't actually like build apps or anything else. But in their free time, that they're obsessed with creating something. And this particular case that I'm thinking about is, just caring about being a good chef, right? Being good at cooking, knowing the equipment that is necessary to cook different type of meat or meat in different style or whatever. And outside of work, that person doesn't do anything, but really just cares about how to cook the best meat, right? I think that's creation, right? In a sense. And I think if you have that kind of personality and everything else, those translate into what makes a great product manager. But it's one of those things where the role is so multidimensional that you risk giving such a trite answer like, oh, you must be obsessed with a problem. Like, many people are
I've spoken about this topic and this question a couple of times, and the answer is never the same. Like, trust me, like, I've never gotten the same answer once, which is why people love to listen to product podcasts. Honestly, like, we do have a lot of listeners for product just because they want to know, and there's no right answer to any of these questions. It's more of your experience and where you're at, right? So, anything else to add on?
I mean, you've recruited a lot. What's the common theme you've seen in the people you've placed?
Am I getting a question? Okay, so I mean, I'm not a product manager, but I've been a product recruiter for about 3 years now. When I started, I thought it was all about the CV and what they had written there. After a year or 2 years now, I realized that is not even the case. I think what I normally ask them is to tell me about their current role, right? What's their value add to the team, right? And the way they describe their product and what they have solved is super important. Because then like just that first 3 minutes of what they talk about their current role, right, you can just see how passionate they are about it. And the truth is, right, that the good product managers, not many of them are looking out. A lot of them, I had to go in and be like, hey, here's a better problem for you to solve. Like, what do you think? And normally they're very bought into ideas. None of them ever ask me, oh, okay, what's this budget like? None. Like, when you reach a certain level of like seniority, they're always like, what is the value add of my role, right? What am I trying to solve? And normally when I say, oh, just to enhance the product, they're not too keen. When you go like, oh, okay, this is the problem, they now need to do this or kind of enhance this because of this reason. And they're like, oh, so building something from scratch, like you guys said, now I'm making the connection. They just really like to build things like from scratch or something that impacts, right? And they always ask me like, I want to be in a position where I make a big impact or I can make something that I call my own, right? And that impacts things. And I think it took me a while to realize that, like, you look at the CV, okay, a couple of good or good companies there, but when you ask them what they built, if they say like part of a team that did this or like I helped to do this, like not the best answer, so that you know. But when they say like, oh yeah, like I found the problem, the issue, the gap, you know, found out what it was, you know, ideated, developed prototypes, failed, did that again, that's why it took so long, and now we got here, right? And I'm not looking to move, but like, what do you have? What opportunities do you have? Right? They always ask me that, and they're only bought in if it's a more interesting idea, right? And that's why I think makes a good product manager. In terms of, you know, what they do, like what you're talking about, you know, some like writing documents and stuff, I would never know that because I'm not a product manager. They could give me all the stuff that they have done, and I would never know. But I think it's really about the way you read people as a recruiter for product. Like for me, like the way you talk about your product, I already know whether you do anything, right? And also like, I also talk to everyone else in your team, so I know if you're lying. Yeah, but mainly because of that, right? When they tell me like, with questions they ask me about the role, is what I realize. And also when they tell me about their products that they have built, that's when I realize that set them out apart. Yeah, of course, that's me as a recruiter, right?
No, that's interesting because again, like you touched upon, it's about are they interested in solving a problem?
Yeah, so in conclusion, right, I think we rambled on it and literally, like, I didn't ask any of the questions because we just slowly covered them one by one. But I think when we reached the end, I think you realize that just a good PM just like solving problems, right?
Of course, right? I mean, there's a lot of good books, good frameworks, good practices to become better once you are in the job to upskill yourself. But I think
yeah, so
not solving a problem.
Yeah, guys, so I think like that's all the time we have for today. I know we rambled on a bit and we covered all the questions without even me asking any of the questions, which is great. But like super incredible and insightful discussion on how to excel as a product manager. I think once again I want to thank you guys, Isaac and Protik, for joining us and shedding light on the intricacies of leveling up as a product manager. And of course, thanks for everyone for tuning in. That's a wrap for this episode of the Evolution Exchange. And join us next time as we explore more captivating topics in this ever-evolving world of product management. And until then, stay inspired and keep innovating, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!